This past Sunday we dealt with, Casey, I don't know, maybe the monitors turned me down. Also, if you can bring these lights down, Casey, maybe this middle one, I'm able to see. This thing is, I feel like a French fry. That's good for me, if that's okay with everybody else. Marty Ball kind of tracks everything, tracks that light. So, last couple weeks we've been dealing with the topic of offense. Not like the one you put around your house, but not offense like you play football and you're on offense, but offense. I'm offended. You did something to me and that hurt me. And so because of that hurt, I held on to it, and now I've carried offense with me, and offense has trapped me in a box. It's trapped me in Satan's scandalon. And so, first week, we looked at the video, and John BEVERE kind of summarizes everything, and I was kind of debating whether to do it first or last, and I thought to kind of pique people's interest a little bit, I wanted to do it first to kind of open up with that. And then, I guess it would be a week and a half ago on Sunday night, we dealt with the definitions and sort of outline what offense is biblically, academically, spiritually, in a worldly sense. How does the world define offense? How does God define offense? And so last Sunday night, this past Sunday night, we dealt with the betrayal of family, friends, and father figures, or friends, family, and father figures, as it were. And so I kind of called Brother David Sunday night, and I had to fast forward through a bunch of stuff that I felt like was integral to the talk. It's very relevant to this topic because family, friends, family members, and father figures, it touches pretty much every one of us in here on some level. And if we miss that in all the weeks, I felt like it was really going to be damaging to us because there's some things, some points that I want to kind of give, some points to ponder concerning offense or betrayal with family, with friends, with father figures. Now, what do I mean by father figures? I mean dads, literal dads, fathers. I mean mentors. I mean baseball coaches. I mean deacons. I mean church leadership. I mean mothers. I mean aunts. I mean big sisters. I mean big brothers. You can almost fit in all three categories. You can almost find yourself in some form or fashion, either one side or the other. Because as life progresses, offense happens. And so Matthew 24:10, I'm just going to kind of revisit that as my starting point, and we're going to pray, and we're going to dive directly in to where we want to go tonight. Matthew 24:10. We're going to read that, and then, while I'm reading, find your place in Genesis 37 and Genesis chapter 50. So Matthew 24:10, Genesis chapter 37, and Genesis chapter 50. Okay? Anybody not there? In Matthew, say, oh my. Okay, Matthew is the first book of the New Testament. Genesis is the first book of the Old Testament. Okay? So Matthew chapter 24, verse number 10. And then many will be offended. This is talking about the last times, okay? The end times, the last of days. And then many, the word there, many, is a Greek word meaning a majority, 51% or more. So more than half in the last days, it's saying that biblically speaking, in the last days, when it comes to the literal last days, and my opinion is that we're, if not there, we're darn close, okay? It's saying that more than 51% of you will be offended and will hold offense and will carry it. Now here, watch the progression that happens in the scripture. And then many, so a majority will be offended. More than 51% of you are either offended or have offended, are offended, or will be very shortly. And then they will betray one another and will hate one another. So we go from offense to betrayal. And that's what I dealt with Sunday night, is the fact of betrayal. Now, I don't know that I define betrayal or not, but I'm going to, because it's so imperative in our study here that we look at the definition of betrayal. Betrayal is this: to seek personal protection or progress. In other words, I'm going to protect myself, or I'm trying to further myself financially, emotionally, however it is. Okay? To seek personal protection or progress at the expense of someone I have a relationship with. That's John BEVERE's definition of betrayal. So it starts off with an offended spirit, and then because I'm in the trap, I'm offended, I'm willing to betray. Now here's the other side of it. Because I have offended someone else, I'm then open to betrayal, either from receiving it or from sending it out. So in other words, once offense happens, either you receive it or it's given by you, by us, okay? Then betrayal, it's not too far-fetched. Christian apologists, those are people that defend our faith, okay? And what they do is they don't try to convince everyone of the resurrection of Jesus right away. What they do is they try to convince the possibility that there could be a God or a creator. And they get in the door by proposing that there could be a God. Because if there's not a God, then the Jesus topic it's irrelevant. But if there is a God, then it's a very good possibility that there's Jesus. Now, offense gets you in the door of betrayal. If you are offended or have offered offense, then it's a very good possibility that you will seek personal protection or progress at the expense of the one that I have a relationship with. And in particular, it's typically the one in the offended party. In other words, either the one who's received the offense, received your offense, or the one who's given offense to you. Okay? That's typically the one that we end up sacrificing. We end up sacrificing our relationship. Now here's the end part. He says, and will hate one another. Now, what happens with hatred? And I really wanted to camp out there Sunday night, and I didn't have the time to do this. And I'm not going to spend too much time on this. But what happens, and we're going to transition into Genesis, because I want you to see this progression through Joseph's brothers, okay? But what happens is the word hatred literally means they are loveless. It's not an emotion of hatred. Man, I just hate that person. That's not the hatred that the Bible is talking about. It's talking about from the standpoint that if I don't love Brother David, then I'm open to offending him. I'm open to receiving offense from him very easily. And I definitely have now become vulnerable for betrayal. Either being betrayed or betraying. Because in my mind, there is no love. And I'm talking about God's love. The love that God can give you in your heart for someone else, regardless of their activity. And I want to show you God's love here in Genesis. So let's turn over to Genesis 37. And I kind of want you to see the beginnings, because if you can see some of the telltale signs of offense and betrayal and hatred, then you can avoid being a participant in it. Okay, so Genesis chapter 37. Let's start at verse number 1, okay? Now Jacob dwelt in the land where his father was a stranger. Who was Joseph's father? Jacob. Who was Jacob's father? Isaac. Who was Isaac's father? Abraham. Okay, so Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. The offspring of Jacob is Joseph. Okay. This is the history of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brothers. So again, another shepherd out in the field. And the lad was with the sons of Bilhah, the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought a bad report of them to his father. That's an interesting thing there, and we may touch on it if we have time a little bit. Verse 3. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all of his children, because he was the son of his old age. He was the son of his promise. Okay. Also, he made him a coat, a tunic, a coat of many colors. But when, this is important here, verse 4, but when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him. Now, they recognized the offense. Okay? Now, moving on. Joseph had a dream, and he told it to his brothers, and they hated him even more. So, what caused the hatred for Joseph through the eyes of his brothers? They saw, go ahead. Okay, favoritism. All right, they were jealous. All right. Those are the main answers that is typical, and that's the direction I'm looking towards. Now, I kind of got here that broken love is when love is broken at some point. We're willing to betray, and then hatred is just a natural outpouring of broken love. Okay, I preached a long while back backwards love. E-V-O-L, evil. Backwards love is always evil. And so, when there's a lack of love, obviously, it's backwards love. Okay? And so there's always a propensity for evil when it happens. So, they saw favor. Okay? Now, I kind of wrote a couple of things. There's an outward with the coat. Okay? Now, why am I saying this? Because your friends and your family members can pick up offense in the same way that Joseph's brothers picked up offense to Joseph, okay? There was an outward thing with the coat, okay? There was an inward thing with Jacob loved Joseph, all right? And then there was an upward thing, a sort of spiritual thing with the dream. Now, how can that apply to us? Well, a lot of times, like when we get something, Casey and I, and this is just kind of opening up here, when we get something new or new to us, I tell her, please do not post it to Facebook. Why would I do that? Why do that? I should be able to say, look what the Lord has done, right? But what happens is, regardless of how those things came about, typically it has the potential of creating seeds of jealousy somewhere down the line. That's right. Now, here's the thing. Now, the person of God, whether it's the preacher or the person in the pew, a person of God, all throughout the Word, if you read these little Word daily devotionals, last couple of days we're talking about success and favor of God. All throughout the Bible, the men, the people of God, had favor on them. The world, the victim mentality, the worldly mentality, it creates envy in them. And at the root of that is a lack of relationship with God that is going to create the offense. And so we end up in hatred, loveless, because essentially in the beginning there's a lack of relationship. Joseph's father did not have a relationship with Joseph's brother, not to the extent that Joseph did. So a natural outpouring of relationship was the outward favor, the inward favor, the love and relationship. Okay? I'm not going to stay there very long, but between friends and family members, if we're not careful, another thing is, so there's this outward blessing that can create some envy and some jealousy and some offense there. Okay? Now, here's one reason why there's some jealousy there, and we talked about relationship with God. But how about, most of the time, your friends and family know your faults. And so what happens is, in our mind, we create these scales of justice, and we say that they are not worthy of receiving whatever it is from God, whether it's a relationship or something physically, because I know their faults. And so an offense can brew. So I'm not trying to be overly deep with this. What I'm trying to do is really point out that the enemy will come at you from all different angles. And he's not going to walk in your front door. If you're a Bible-believing person of God, he's not walking in your front door because he knows it's locked. He's going to crawl in through the window. He's going to come in through the back door. If you notice, most successful people, you're not going to find them on Facebook gloating over all they got. You will not see that ever. Never. Why? Because they know what kind of situation. Certain people in the church that give and tithe, they do not want their names to be talked about. On one hand, you say, well, they should be an example for people, and they're following God. But on the other hand, they're like, no, because I know that creates potential for offense. And it's not worth it to me. And so, I feel like that is godly wisdom to be able to kind of make sure and you got to pick your battle. You got to follow God on that. All right, so Genesis 37. So they saw his coat. All right. So then what did they do? This hatred and they're kind of swapped, because the lack of love that was created from the offense turned into betrayal. Right? And what happened to Joseph? He got sold into slavery. And so what happened is they perceived favor from the father, and then they sold him, they sold their family member, and then finally they seethed in their hearts. They seethed over their own failures and Joseph's successes. And a lot of times, when we find ourselves envious or jealous of another individual, it's because it's clarifying the insecurity or hang-up or ineptitude in our own life. And so success, many times, is the polar opposite of failures in our life. Now, here's the key with failures, is that in Proverbs it says, a fool answers a matter before he hears it completely. So what is that saying? It's only failure if you don't allow God to turn it into something good. Flip it over to Genesis 50. Failure has the idea of a finality. There's, like on the old game show, is that your final answer? If you confess and adopt about failure in your life, then it does not leave room for God to swap it out. That's why I picked the song Trading My Sorrows, just because I love the idea of taking our junk to God. And he doesn't take offense because we're literally sinning against him. What does he do? He offers you your life. Genesis 50, verse, let's say verse number 18. Let's start there, okay? Back it up to 15. Let's just do 15. When Joseph's, Genesis 50, verse 15, 1-5. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, perhaps Joseph will hate us too. Now, offense can never be replaced with more offense. In a worldly mindset, in a not godly mindset, what will happen is all of a sudden I don't make it right with the person because I think that the same feelings that I have towards them, they're going to come back to with me. Okay? That's a worldly mindset. Okay? He said maybe, I wonder if Joseph will hate us and may actually repay us for all the evil that we did to him. So they sent messengers to Joseph. They didn't even want to go themselves, saying, before your father died, he commanded, saying, thus you shall say to Joseph, I beg you, please forgive the trespass of your brothers and their sin. And they did evil to you. Now please forgive the trespass of the servants of God, of your father. And Joseph wept when they spoke to him. You know why? Because he held offense in his heart. And he was heartbroken because they still had a victim mentality and they did not get what God was trying to do through the situation. They could not comprehend. And that is what the enemy does when it comes to offense, especially through friends, family members, and father figures. And we're going to talk about it really Sunday night in church because that's almost the most vile offense that there can be. Because it takes us just completely out of God's will. Is the fact that it's so personal that we go ahead and we adopt the world's mindset and say, you should be mad, you should hold on to this, all of this stuff. And not only that, but it authorizes you and I to betray someone. And when we've been convinced that it's okay to pay somebody back evil for their evil, then we've taken on a worldly mindset, a victim mentality. So, then his brothers also went and fell down before his face. So they sent the messenger, they gave the message, then the brothers went in after Joseph finally told them that it was really him. Then his brothers also went and fell down before his face, and they said, behold, we are your servants. So here is a good lesson. If you offend somebody, what do? If you want to get back in a relationship with them? You go to them. And we're going to deal with that in the last week. We're going to deal with some steps of how to restore relationships that are broken. But these guys, they fell on their face and said, we are your servants. In other words, when you offend somebody, you've sinned against them, and so there's a penalty that must be paid for that, according to the law. And so when you offend somebody, you're literally indebted to them. When I went to Teen Challenge, I had sinned against my family. And I was so indebted that my dad would ask me, some guys would call their family with laundry lists full of stuff. And God told me, do not ask for a thing. If they ask you, if you need something, then you better make sure that it's something that you need and not something more. And even to the fact of, I knew that I owed them so much more than I could ever pay them. Not financially, emotionally, all of that. And so when my dad would say, do you need razors or whatever, you know, I didn't even like to ask him that. Why? Because the sin created a debt. And that's the danger of offense, is that it creates an imbalance and an indebtedness inside our relationship. There's such an imbalance that happens. And so what is your best option? You bow down. I'm not saying get on your hands and knees, okay? You may need to do that. Who knows? Some of us may need to get on our hands and knees once in a while. You know? Spiritually, yeah. Exactly. But they humbled themselves. And they said, we're your servants. We're willing, in other words, the translation, Jim translation, we're willing to do whatever it is that you want me to do to make this right. And when we have an offense with somebody, when we're offended, what happens, and we're going to talk about this in just a minute, is we demand that they get on their face before us. And when they don't, we hold out forgiveness to them. And then we're indebted to God because we've done the same thing that they did to us when they hurt us. See? Joseph said to them in verse 19, do not be afraid, for this is so good here. And this is what happens when you hold offense. This is what you're doing. Do not be afraid, for am I in the place of God? That's a harsh truth right there. This is one of the main reasons why I wanted to deal with this, because this is something that God dealt with me so significantly with. The drugs were a symptom of something that was really going on down deep. It was offense, it was hatred, it was betrayal. It was a godlessness that had taken over my life. And I was in the place of God. When you decide that you're in the place of God, that's the other word for hatred. It's loveless, but it's also lawless. You're a law unto yourself. So what happens out of that is there's a rebellious nature. I don't care what society says. I don't care what parents say. I don't care what leaders say. I don't care what you say. I don't care what truth says. Why? Because I'm lawless. That's if these are evidences of having hatred in our hearts, or a lack of God's love in our heart, is when there's a rebellion that comes out in us. There's something that we have not dealt with that needs to be dealt with in order to go forward. Am I in the place of God? So what happens is a lawless person puts themselves in God's place. Verse 20. But as for you, you meant evil against me. Now he could have stopped there, told his servants to take them out and chop their head off, because that's what most of us would do and do. Somebody breathes wrong around us, and we're ready to take them out back and lynch them. Amen. Joseph had a legitimate right, didn't he? Amen. No, he had the opportunity, but not the right. You never, and that is where we go wrong. Even the worst case scenario, you never have the right to take offense, to hold offense. Never. Because what did Joseph say? Am I in the place of God? That's where he went right. And that's where his brothers went wrong, because they decided that they would take God's place in Joseph's life. And Joseph did not take God's place in their life. What a great example of what to do and what not to do. But as for you, you meant evil against me. However, here's a but God for you. But God meant it for good, in order to bring it about as it is this day, and to save many people alive. How many people went into Egypt with Joseph? With Joseph, out of jail, how many went with him into Pharaoh's court? It's really simple. One, him, right? How many people left when Moses carried them out of Egypt? 400 million. 400 million. So what did Joseph do? What did God do through Joseph by allowing that? He prevented losses. They were in an extreme famine. In fact, the taxes that you and I pay today, which we all dislike, Joseph implemented those in Pharaoh's court. And he told Pharaoh that if you want to have, there's going to be 7 years of feast and 7 years of famine, okay? And in those 7 years of feast, you need to, everybody, if you have 5 loaves of bread, everybody needs to give you 1 loaf. Bring it to the storehouse and we're going to save it. And then in the 7 years of famine, what's going to happen is we're going to dispense it all out. So Joseph prevented a lot of loss of life. He prevented the loss of an entire country, and essentially he prevented the loss of Jesus Christ. Because through that lineage, David, etc., Jesus. But he also, God was preparing a leader, because when he, think about little Joseph, and he had the father's favor, you know, he probably took that little coat, just wore it around, you know, Think about that. And also, then he said, brothers, I need to tell you something. Quick. You know, they're thinking, you know, he's going to tell them something great. He said, one day you're going to bow down to me. So Joseph wasn't ready for what God had for him. And so he used this opportunity, whereas the enemy wants you to get trapped in offense. God says, no, I'm trying to use this as it is this day, as Joseph said, for your good. It also preserved lives. 1 went in, 430 million went out years later. Okay, 2 million, actually. I'm wrong on my numbers, I'm backwards. 430 years later, 2 million left. Here we go. Sorry, I got it. Took me. But still, you get the point, okay? I was only 200x off. Exponentially, that's not that bad. All right. So, let's bring it home with family, friends, and father figures, okay? Let's bring it home. Proverbs 13:12. I've got 3 points, and then we're going to be done tonight, okay? Some points to ponder when it comes to family, friends, and father figures and betrayal. Proverbs 13:12. I'm in 12:13. I'm dyslexic. I'm dyslexic. Okay, Proverbs 13:12. I have the New King James. It says, hope deferred makes the heart sick. But when desire comes, it is a tree of life. Does anybody have the New Living Translation? Or what do you got? NIV, read the NIV real quick.
Evildoers are cramped, trapped by their sinful talk, and so the innocent.
13:12, Jake. Yeah, I messed up, sorry.
Mine says, hope deferred makes the heart sick, but when dreams come true, there is a life in joy.
Okay, that's a good one. That's a good
That's
one.
life application.
Okay, that's good. When dreams come true, Joseph's dream still came true despite offense, despite the situation and all that. So, hope deferred makes the heart sick. So, I've got 3 points, okay? I'm going to give them all to you, and then we're going to talk about them. First of all, set expectations. I don't have these in the notes. So, set expectations. The second one is sow love. And the third one is stay in shape, okay? So, let's deal with it one at a time. Proverbs 13:12 says, hope deferred makes the heart sick. Second half of that, Tish, what did that say? Dreams come true.
But when dreams come true, there is life and joy.
There is life and joy. Okay, so now here's the thing. Unmet expectations is what? We talked about this. What happens when what is unmet expectations? Disappointment. Very good. Okay, so when we end up disappointed, what happens is, I think of things very visually, but when I don't realize an expectation, in other words, when I don't have what I thought in my mind does not come true, then I open myself up to be hurt. I open myself up for hurt. So we've really got to be careful that when it comes specifically to family, friends, and father figures. Now, in a family situation, you got to be really careful because they're right up next to you all the time. Okay? You know their faults. And they know yours. And it's very, very difficult to not have disappointment happen within a family setting. For example, my dad, basically I revered him, and this would go along with father figures, but I really revered him. Okay, he was like very revered in my mind. He still is, you know. Now here's the thing. One time we were working and I heard him cuss. I never heard that before. And you know what? It just broke my little heart. Because I had set such a high expectation for my dad. And that was not reality. It wasn't reality. So how do we end up with disappointment concerning expectations? First of all, you got to set biblical expectations. Now, it's okay to set a biblical expectation. Now, they may or may not follow that because none of us can follow the Bible completely. But if we're all striving towards these biblical marks, these biblical goals, then what happens is you know, there's a parallel there. There's a unity that happens. And whenever there's unity, it brings us together. Okay? And so even if I miss the mark, that's literally what sinning means, to miss the mark. Even if I miss the mark, there's enough unity and cohesion that our friendship, that our family situation, how about your pastor? If he messes up, well, if there's enough biblical unity, then the relationship can still survive. But when the relationship does not survive over offense, then there wasn't enough biblical foundation that was laid in order to keep it. Okay? Now, also set beneficial expectations. Set expectations for someone else that are going to benefit them. In Philippians it says, let each esteem others better than yourself. So set an expectation for someone else that's going to benefit them. In other words, if you're a father figure and you're setting them for children, then set some goals that you know they can work towards, and so that they aren't disappointed with their own self. Set some goals in a friendship that if they don't meet those goals, that you can still work through that stuff and you work going forward. You know, it's the old phrase, you got to have a disagreement without having a falling out. And in a family situation, you have no choice. I mean, you do have a choice, I guess. You can have a falling out, but it's a lot harder because you see them and they're around and all that. And so it makes it really tough. And so set benefits. In other words, when I say beneficial expectations, set an expectation that's going to be beneficial for the relationship as a whole. Okay? All right. Also, be realistic. Don't set unrealistic goals. I thought my dad was perfect and could never mess up, and when he did, I decided that he wasn't perfect. And so I had to I could be mad, offended, because I was disappointed, or I could reevaluate my expectations for people. Now, when it comes to father figures, those are the very hardest. Father figures are the very hardest to live up to the expectations that people set. Because they're supposed to do this, and they're supposed to do that, and they're supposed to do these things. But no one can live up to your expectations. They can work towards God and what He sets forth. And if I know that somebody is genuine, like at Mercy House, if they're just blatantly doing something crazy, then I would definitely discipline them severely. But I know if they were genuinely working towards something positive and they fell short, for example, in their work or something like that, then I was going to be a lot more lenient than if somebody just decides they're just not going to do it. Okay? So be realistic in your expectations. Also, set expectations that are buildable. In other words, it doesn't have to be a high-end expectation. Set something that you can build upon, okay? Set something that you all can work towards and maybe work together. Set some expectations where you can come together and build the relationship as far as in that. Set expectations, here's a good one, that are breakable. Because they're going to get broken, some form or fashion. So make sure that they have some flexibility, okay? All right, Galatians 6:9, the second one, so love. Okay, I'm going to start at the 7. Do not be deceived, God is not mocked. For whatever a man sows, that will he also reap. For he who sows to his flesh will of the flesh reap corruption. But he who sows to the Spirit will of the Spirit reap everlasting life. And let us not grow weary while doing good. For in due season we shall reap if we do not give up. In due season we shall reap. So love. So set expectations in a family situation, in a friendship, in a marriage, with a father figure. Set expectations and sow love, okay? First of all, don't expect a natural harvest. It's got to be a harvest in God's time. And when we put our parameters around what we think should happen in a situation, we take away God's ability to transform the situation, okay? Like I said in Proverbs, a fool answers a matter before he hears it completely. So don't answer the matter until God has had his say in it. Okay? So love. Don't demand expect a natural harvest. Don't demand an immediate return. Now, in family and friendships and all of that, I give to them, I give to them, I give to them, and they never give back, they never do this, they never respond. And what's happening is we're expecting this natural harvest like I'm talking about, but we're demanding an immediate return. And that is worse as years go by, technology gets better, as we progress as a microwave society, the more we demand immediate returns in our friendships and in our relationships. And if you invest into a situation and expect a return at all, much less an immediate return, you are going to enter disappointment. You sow love, and the other party, now you say, well, you're just saying that I should sow love and they shouldn't do anything. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is two parties should both sow love, and then love is what you're going to reap. But if anywhere there's anything else sown besides love, you're going to get whatever a man sows, that will he reap. So if you sow love, it's going to come back. You are going to receive a harvest. It may not be the natural harvest or in your time or whatever. Don't grow weary. So don't expect a natural harvest. Don't demand the immediate return. Don't grow weary in well-doing. If I know that doing positive things for people is a good thing and it's a God thing, then don't grow weary of doing that. Because if you ever grow weary of doing that, then you're doing it with an impure motive. Or you have unbiblical expectations, okay? Something's off there. So love, blessing, don't give up. Don't give up. If you're in a relationship and it's stretched and it's really been through the ringer, don't give up, because God restored Joseph and his brothers years later with more offense than we could all probably combine in this room. And God still restored that relationship. So don't give up. Don't give up on that family member. Don't give up on that friend. Don't give up on that father figure. You pray, you sow love, you set realistic expectations, you sow love into their life, and then the last one, you stay in shape. In Acts 24:16, just read that real quick. It says, I have, this being so, talking about the resurrection, this being so, I myself always exercise or strive to have a conscience without offense towards God and man. So, what do I mean by stay in shape? First of all, the just and the unjust will be resurrected. What do I mean by that? That one day God's going to sort it all out. And so you got to do your part in the meantime until God gets the chance to sort it out. It says the just, in verse 15, just and the unjust will be resurrected. So it's going to happen. There's going to be a judgment day. There is going to be a day of reckoning. And you can't have the day of reckoning be when you decide it. Okay? Work hard to stay in shape. He says, I exercise to be without offense. You have to be mindful. You have to put in the time and the effort and the hard work in order to avoid offense and not be offended. So, in other words, to not offend and to not receive. Now, there will be plenty of opportunities. There's plenty of them, both ways. But it's up to you to catch the Altoids, to receive the offense, or you can let it fall on the ground where it deserves to be, down with all the junk. So work hard to stay in shape with your family, your friends, your father figures. It says to be without offense. In other words, make it a point, make it a goal that if I'm offended, I'm going to get things right. And make it a goal to not carry offense around. Because that's a weight that you and I are not able to carry. And it always leads to betrayal, and it always leads to hatred. A godless, loveless, lawless situation where you'll end up selling out your family, friends, or whatever. And you know what? The money was long gone really quickly for Joseph's brothers. So we end up trading out that which is temporary for that which is eternal when we hold on to offense. Let's pray. God, I pray that if there's a family member that has either been offended or has offended someone else, God, I pray you would give us the courage to make things right. I pray if there's a friendship that someone has lost based on offense, that we would be godly and mature and humble ourselves and go to that person. I pray if there's a father figure that we've wrote off, or as a father figure we've offended someone under us. It's our godly duty that if we've offended, to go to them. God, I pray that you would give us the courage as a body, as Temple Baptist Church, but as individuals. You would give us the courage to stay out of Satan's traps. The traps of Satan are why the pews aren't full, the offering plates aren't full, and the harvests are not coming in. Because there's so much offense that happens in the church, just like we're going to talk about next week. God, I pray that you would just go before us in that topic. You would anoint all of our ears and our minds concerning this offense in the church. God, you would give us something special so that we can be set free and really grow as a body. In Jesus' name.